Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss at Internet Shitlords. And today I'm not making coffee. It's a different time from when I usually film. I'm making yerba mate instead, which is a very popular sort of drink down here. You might know yerba mate in tea shops and stuff like that as herbal teas, but that's not the proper way to drink it. This is. It's very powerful stuff, actually, and I quite like it. I've developed quite the taste for it. So, today, there we go. Today I'm going to talk to you about disabilities in your OSR or D&D games. Oh, there's my cat. Hi. You're completely blocking the screen because you're an absolute unit. Yeah, look at you. You're enormous. You blocked the entire screen. Your sister doesn't do that. Hey, that's not for you. Alright, so pardon my cat there. We're talking about disabilities in OSR and D&D games, and I'm bringing this up because of a Twitter incident. As usual, some of the most exciting things happen on Twitter, and it was a situation where someone had been asking about how to portray disabilities in D&D, and they asked it, of course, in the most SJW-ish way possible, accusing D&D of being ableist, which is really funny because it's pretty much one of the least ableist games in the world. I mean, you don't have to move to do it. You could pretty much be quadriplegic and play D&D. And of course, if you're talking about not physical but mental disabilities, I'm pretty sure that there's a large number of autistic people who enjoy D&D. So. They're really grasping at straws there. Anyway, this is an interesting subject because it's an interesting subject that has, it can be a really cool thing to play a character with a disability in a D&D or OSR game. But not if you're doing it just for virtue signaling, right? I've got this series, I've got, my game, Lion and Dragon, and I've got this series of PDF products for sale called RPGpundit Presents. You can find them on DriveThruRPG or RPG Now, or at the Presses Intermedia website. I'll probably put a link in the description. We're up to like 58 issues by now, and it's a weekly product, short supplements on a number of different subjects, and about half of them are Gonzo games, and about half of them, or material for Gonzo games, and about half of them are what I call medieval authentic, which is stuff designed in mind for like games like Lion and Dragon or Dark Albion, but that you could basically put into any semi-serious D&D fantasy world or OSR fantasy world to give it a more authentic medieval flair. And one of these products is called the Expanded Critical Tables. And that's an expansion of the critical table that's already in Lion and Dragon, which is a smaller table. This other product goes more detailed into different types of wounds, slashing, piercing, animal attacks, bolts, arrows, all that sort of stuff. And these tables are meant to be like anatomical. They're not just, double damage or something like that. They have different effects depending on what part of the body was hit and how, with what type of weapon. And a lot of them can cause temporary or permanent disabilities, right? And so they're very interesting, and they're something I use in my game, I also have players who are probably some of them are somewhere on the autistic spectrum. And I've got another player who's dyslexic, diagnosed dyslexic. I've never had any players myself who were, blind or something like that, but D&D is certainly a game you can play with almost any kind of disability. So it's to accuse the game of being ableist and unsupportive is nonsense, right? So there is a way to interpret and to present different kinds of disabilities in D&D. But first I'm going to tell you what not to do, which is what this person who I was responding to on Twitter did, which is call out, oh, hey folks, D&D is such an ableist game. Is there some way to effectively present disabilities? And then when responses came in, this person made it very clear that what they weren't looking for is mechanical penalties of any kind, right? So the idea that, you know, if you've got a disability, that's going to cause you certain penalties to doing things. No, that doesn't fly, because that somehow you're an evil bigot if you propose that, you know, someone who's who's crippled in one leg would somehow have a penalty to movement, right? And they also made it very clear that what they actually wanted was to have, you know, the equivalent of special treatment, special benefits for their disability, right? They were also expecting that the rest of the party would accommodate their disability, and the DM would accommodate the disability. And we're talking about the character. Now, the person asking claimed to also have disabilities, you know, fibromyalgia, I think was what they said. Fibromyalgia. But in any case, they were expecting, what they didn't want was to have physical penalties, you know, in stats or in roles, or to make things harder for themselves. But instead what they really wanted was to be able to demand, if they create a character with a disability, that the game be entirely about them, right? That it focus, the whole group have to focus around the disabled character, and, you know, treat the disabled character in a special way. And then there were even people asking, well, you know, that they were saying, well, yeah, disability can be really interesting because it has to do with, you know, overcoming challenges. And this person was like, no, you can't say that, because the point isn't to overcome challenges. You can never stop being a victim, right? You have to just live with the challenge, right? And so everybody else has to help you, right? It was just an example of the regressive mentality at work, right? Not the idea that, well, you know, you're going to have penalties, but now you're going to have to figure out how to work your way around that and how to do things better. No, it was just, you're going to end up having no real discernible penalties, and you're going to end up having the DM and the players cater to you, and it's not about your character growth, right? Like, what's the point? What are you doing there? What does that accomplish other than exhibit the nature of, you know, the grievance culture of the millennial SJW of the modern era, you know? Like, it's sending the most horrible message imaginable. It's saying, if you have a disability, everyone else has to take care of you forever. You can take no responsibility for your own life, and you can never get better, because getting better would somehow be revealing that individuals have agency over themselves and are not just groups of hierarchy, you know, victimhood hierarchy subjects that have to understand that there's nothing they can do about their own oppression, right? That you know, if you're, and not just disabled, but whatever, if you're a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're LGBT, then all of these things put you in one place that counts as a group category. And to suggest that you can do something different than what SJWs want that group category to represent would be a betrayal, because you're then talking about individualism. You're suggesting that you have control over your own life, and that things, good or bad things, don't have to necessarily define you, right? And that you can define yourself by more than what are just your identitarian traits, you know? So, you know, if I'm a Latino, then Latino is all I am, and I'm stuck being Latino as the only definition of myself, and everything is looked through the lens of my Latino-ness, right? And if I thought, well, you know, actually being Latino isn't that big of a deal, and I've got a lot of other things that are important about my life, that, of course, is a terrible betrayal, right? And the idea that if you came from poverty, or if you were disabled, or if you were, you know, they treat being a minority as a disability, right? They're co-equivalent to them, right? Which is just disgusting, right? But the idea that if you're a Latino, or you're a black person, or something like that, then you can't possibly better yourself, right? You can't possibly change anything or improve anything. You are a constant victim of the imperialist patriarchal structure that oppresses you constantly, and nothing will ever change that. But all you can do is demand that everybody cater to your every whim forever, and protect you and maintain you, but not that you yourself can take any responsibility for anything you do in your entire life, right? That's what they see as the formula there. Right? So this is just dumb, right? And that's why I responded to this person with a mockery of the nonsense that they were trying to sell. But actually, there is an interesting side to all this, which is that there is a lot to be said about playing characters that have challenges that they face. If your character is already perfect, and this is one of the great problems that the SJW types have with characters, because they demand representation, right? You have to have female characters in movies, TV shows, role-playing games, books, comics, everywhere, that have to be strong female characters. They have to be stronger than anyone else. They have to be better than anyone else. They have to know the science more than anyone else, and they can't ever end up being beaten by anyone else. So that means that they're basically already Mary Sue's, right? There's nothing that they can do but to them, to the SJWs, there's nothing that they have to do, right? Because all they have to say is, well, I've got this RPG, and in this RPG, my character is a strong, powerful barbarian woman. Okay, so what does she do? What? She's a strong, powerful barbarian woman. That's it. That's all. That what she is what what you are is what you do. From the point of view of SJWs, because it's identitarian, right? So there's no distinction. To them, the whole point of having a character be changed into a minority or something like that in a movie or a comic, it's not to add anything. It's just for that. It's for it to be there, right? And if you create a character who is a strong female hero, then that's it. That's the plot. She's a strong female hero. That's all that matters to them. But if you're looking at this from the other point of view, from the point of view of the hero's journey, then there's a lot to be said to that. And of course, in an OSR game, you have characters that are rolled at random, and sometimes they can have really, really low stats. And people who have played characters with really, really low stats in old school games will know a secret that nobody else does, which is that if you've done it enough times, most people think, well, I must just suck, right? But actually, when you have one of them that somehow, by your guile, by good luck, by wits, manages to survive and starts going up a level, those often become your very favorite characters because they've overcome adversity, right? If you start a character that's got all 18s or something like that, there's nothing to be overcome. You're already going in with an enormous advantage, right? But if you're starting from a position of disadvantage and you somehow accomplish things, then that's a huge deal, right? And there are lots of good ways to present different sorts of disabilities. You can have some that you could start with some if you wanted to. I mean, I don't think there should be a table where you have a chance of beginning with a disability or not. But well, actually, that's not exactly true, because there are some things you could have, right? In I'm just published yesterday. The latest RPGpundit presents is the expanded character background tables, which are random tables that you roll for some interesting detail of your past. And one of them is that you have some kind of a deformity, right? That is, in the medieval world, that would have been a very serious problem. But there are famous cases of people with deformities that overcame them in different ways, right? Ivar the Boneless or Richard Crookback, right? And that turned out to be, absolute badasses in spite of, of what today we would call a disability, right? So there's also the possibility of getting disabilities in the course of play that don't necessarily have to be character ending, right? In a game with anatomical criticals like Lion and Dragon, it can become pretty common that if your character lives long enough, he's at least going to start getting some nasty scars from fights where he's taken a critical. But there are characters that are going to lose that are going to lose body parts, right? Or have other effects. So there's, in my current Lion and Dragon campaign, there's one character who lost one eye, right? And in the expanded critical tables, the rules for that affect, your ability to do a number of things, because that changes your whole perspective. It gives you penalties for combat and short range, and especially for long range combat, because it affects your depth perception. And then in some cases of some of these things, you can end up training yourself out of it, right? I mean, we've got the, in Game of Thrones, you have the whole Jaime Lannister thing where he's the greatest swordsman in the world. He loses a hand, right? He's never going to be as great as he once was, but he's trying to train himself to become some semblance of what he once was, right? And in my Lion and Dragon campaign, we actually had a character who lost a hand too. It wasn't his sword hand; it was his shield hand, as it turned out. But so then that guy went and he had basically a special shield made that is an extension to that, like a kind of prosthesis, which was very cool, right? A good way to try to get around that, at least for the purpose of being able, because this character was a knight, to be able to keep fighting in the field, right, with at least close to as much effectiveness as before. So there are some disabilities where you're going to have penalties, and those are, if it's a permanent disability, that's it. And there are others where the way I did it in the rules is that you have the disabilities in some cases for a certain period of time, if it's a short-term injury, an injury that recovers. But if it's a permanent injury, there can be some penalties that you can take away when you level up. After you go up one level, or maybe if it's a very serious problem, that it'll go up, that you'll reduce some of the penalties at one level and a bit more of the penalties when you go up the next level. So I tied it into leveling as a way to represent that over time you can train yourself to get around some of the, to compensate for some of the effects of, lost body parts or injuries to the sensory organs or things like that. So, that makes it very interesting. But in role-playing terms, it makes it very interesting to be able to see what you can do with this character, right? We had in the original Dark Albion campaign, the one that the Lion and Dragon rules came out of, a character that was playing a wizard, and this wizard had, because of some weird magical effects, ended up in a situation where they essentially no longer had any short-term memory to speak of, right? Like they're effectively going to be forgetting almost everything that was being directed at them, and the way that they tried to compensate around that, like they had their long-term memory still from the past, right? And so they were working on finding ways to get around that, and it became a very big part of that character, right? And the character ended up, it might have helped because it was a wizard, not a fighting type, and because at that point the character was a fairly old wizard and was powerful and respected and expected, as most wizards are, to be weird by then, right? But it was very interesting for the player to make up for that difficulty that they had. So I would definitely say, there's certainly room. First of all, there's certainly room for people who have disabilities of different kinds to play D&D. Obviously, anyone who is suggesting that D&D is an ableist game, either in game or out of game, is just full of it, right? It's just absolute nonsense. And there are tons of gamers out there. One of the nice things about this is when I responded to this tweet, I had some people that, of course, the usual suspects, the SJW crowd, were just outraged. How dare I make fun of this person? Well, I wasn't making fun of the person. I was making fun of the stupid thing they were saying, right? But I also had a ton of people who liked and retweeted my post and who commented, including a number of people in that thread where I did the post, that were saying, I have X disability, right? Different people had, different things. I said, and I don't have any problem playing D&D, right? Like, I don't understand why. Some of them were saying, I wouldn't actually want to play a disabled character. Others were saying, well, I could see the point in playing a disabled character. But the idea either that, people who are disabled are unable to play D&D because of how, toxic and bigoted we are is just nonsense. Or that the idea that everybody who is disabled would actually want to play a disabled character in D&D. That's also pretty much nonsense, right? But anyone who wants to play one should play one from that point of view of the challenge of developing a more profound character through overcoming the adversities of that disability, right? Of being able to figure out how to be an effective character with the disability. And I guess that's it for today. I want to thank everyone who's been subscribing. If you haven't subscribed before now, please subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss one of these videos. I want to thank everybody who's been supporting me on Patreon. The support has been going up, so if you want to support me on Patreon, the link will be in the description. I would be very happy, and the more Patreon support I get, once we get to a certain threshold, I will be obliged to do 2 videos a week. But besides that, if you want to support me a different way, say you're not too happy with Patreon right now, you could check out the RPG Pundit Presents series and look at the PDFs there and pick 1 or 2 or more up. They're all quite inexpensive because they're smaller books, but they're all very good books, and you're bound to find something that you're going to find interesting in the, I think, 57 or 58 issues that we've released so far. So that's another way to support me and support my current publisher, Presses Intermedia. And more than anything, share the videos, right? If you share the videos, other people will find out about it and they'll come along. So please spread the word. And I guess that's it for today. Stay tuned next week for another video, and before the end of the month, and I guess of the year, we'll be doing another episode of Inappropriate Characters. I think that's going to be on the 27th of December. So keep your eyes open for that. I don't know when I'm doing another live stream on this channel, but I probably will sooner or later. So keep your eyes open for that too. All right then. Currently smoking a Lorenzetti poker with Gowit's Springtime Flake.